and he calls the queen before him. She refuses to come because the invitation includes her wearing her crown, just her crown. So he then gets advice from his friends while they're all drinking and decide to banish the queen. And so wine is a mocker, strong drink is a brawler. Whoever is intoxicated by it is not wise. The terror of the king is like the growling of a lion. He who provokes him to anger forfeits his own life. So we see Proverbs played out. So there's an application. I mean, there's no biblical prohibition against having a drink. Paul tells Timothy to take some wine for his stomach, but the wine is not to cure his stomach. The wine's to cure his nerves, so his stomach doesn't hurt. So, but it's pretty clear. The Bible's clear that don't be drunk with wine. So there's a difference here, but the king was clearly over the line in his drinking and in his actions. So he's banished the queen. So what happens now? That old thing happened in the 3rd year of his reign. This is now the 7th year of his reign. What happens between chapter 1 and chapter 2 is he goes on this military offensive against the Greeks. It's so popular in history, they made a movie about it. It's called 300. I've not seen it, but I'm told it's really, really good. So King Xerxes goes to Greece, and he kind of gets smoked by the Greeks. And it doesn't go well, so he gets back from losing a war, so he's lost a lot of money, he's lost a lot of war, and now he's sitting at home going, I feel bad, and now I don't have a queen. So he's sad, and here's where it picks up in chapter 2. Oh, and by the way, since I made these slides for the Old Testament teaching in town, I am working now from the ESV. We're not switching Bibles. So just know the book of Esther be in ESV. So if you're like, oh, did he switch Bibles? No, just for this book, because I already made the slides. And by the time I realized that last week, I'd already made the slides. So here we go. So, chapter 2, after these things, when the anger of the king Ahasuerus abated, he remembered Vashti and what she had done and what had been done decreed against her. So the king's young men who attended him said, let beautiful young virgins be sought out for the king, and let the king appoint officers in all provinces of his kingdom, and gather all the beautiful young virgins to the harem of Susa, the citadel, under the custody of Haggai, the king's eunuch, who is in charge of the woman, and let their cosmetics be given to them, and then let the young women who please the king be the young woman who pleases the king be queen instead of Vashti. And this pleased the king, so he did so. So they didn't have Tinder, and I don't know what the dating apps are these days. I haven't been on that market in like decades, and I'm glad for it. But so what he's sitting around, he's not angry anymore, and he remembered what he had done, what had been done against Vashti, and what he decreed against her. In a moment of drunken anger, he banished his queen. It would seem from history she's got 3 sons with him, and so it would seem that he gets to see his sons from history, but he can't see her ever again, and he doesn't have a queen. So he's sad, and he's sitting by himself, and the men who attended him said, let beautiful young virgins be sought out for the king. They're sought out, these young ladies. And if they're not married, it is presumed in this culture that they are virgins, right? There was a stigma, but a real stigma that could get you in real trouble about premarital sexual activity at these times. And so let them be sought out. And so throughout all the provinces, all the officers, they're going to gather all the beautiful young women into his harem in Susa, the citadel. And they're going to be given to this custody, and they'll be given cosmetics. So they're going to bring them all in here, and they're going to get all kinds of nice stuff, cosmetics and nice clothes and all that sort of stuff. So if you're a pretty girl, you win the prize. and you're going to get to go to this thing with the king. Yay! Beauty camp. We'll get to the rest later. It's not as beautiful as you would presume, right? So there's sometimes we think about people who are what we perceive to be really beautiful, and it gets them places. It's going to get them to this place. Yeah. So, and the young woman that pleases the king, she can be queen instead of Vashti, and this pleased the king. So we see beautiful young women are going to be brought to him, and this pleased the king. Now, here's a pattern developing with this king. Whatever pleases him or whatever he does in the moment seems to be the direction that he goes, right? We talked about it in chapter 1. He gets counsel from the men who knew the times, but we talked about this never fails and it never wavers. It's always the same. This guy tends to make decisions based on the emotion of the moment. In this case, it's going to affect him. He's going to get a queen, but it also affects a lot of other young women. Verse 5. Now, there was a Jew in Susa, the citadel, whose name was Mordecai, son of Jair, son of Shimei, son of Kish, a Benjaminite, and who had been carried away from Jerusalem among the captives, the king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, carried away. And he was bringing up Hadassah, that is Esther, the daughter of his uncle, for she had neither father or mother. The young woman had a beautiful figure and was lovely to look at. When her father and her mother died, Mordecai took her as his own daughter. So when the king's order and his edict were proclaimed, when many young women were gathered in the Susa, the citadel, the custody of Haggai, Esther was also taken among the king's palace, and she's put in the custody of Haggai, who had charge of the woman. And the young woman, woman placed with him, who won his favor, and he quickly provided her with cosmetics, her portion of food, and with the 7 chosen young women from the king's palace, and advanced her and the young woman to the best place in the harem. Now it's going to do this. So now it introduces to us Mordecai and Esther. So what you see with Mordecai and Esther, first of all, he was taken away in the Babylonian captivity. So, and he's in the citadel of Susa, right? So, and it gives a brief history of his family and the Benjaminites. This is important to the Jews. Family line is always important. But as far as the importance to us, I'm not going to get into it too much because it doesn't, for our narrative, it's not terribly important. So, now this thing is, the machine is thinking. Can you go to the next slide, please, Jim? And then, so he's a Benjaminite of the tribe of Benjamin in Judah. They were carried away from Jerusalem by King Nebuchadnezzar. If you'll go to verse 7, please. And he was bringing up Hadassah. So, that is Esther. So her Jewish name is Hadassah. And so she gets this name that is not a Jewish name. And she is with... So, the daughter of her uncle, and she had neither father or mother. And the young woman had a beautiful figure, and she's lovely to look at. And so now we know that her parents died some kind of way. And so this is what you see here. What Mordecai does is he takes her in, and this would be called a kinsman redeemer. You see this happen in a different way in the book of Ruth. If you want to see that, Mike taught that years ago. It's on the website. But the concept of this kinsman redeemer, when there's an opening in the family where somebody's left untaken care of, another family member in the family tree would then step in and take care of somebody like their own. So that's also important. So he's taking care of her. Verse 8, if you would, Jim. So when the king's order and his edict were proclaimed, many young women were gathered together in the custody of Haggai and taken into the king's palace and put under the custody of Haggai, who had charge of the woman. So there's an interesting thing here. Some of the men were appointed to be eunuchs. These are men who are castrated. So if you're castrated, you can be in and with the women, and the king is not worried that you're going to be sliding in and doing things with his women. So he's got lots of them, but nobody else can touch the women. So that's kind of the situation there. So she gets cosmetics and a portion of food. And now she's with 7 young women from the king's palace, and he advanced her and the young women to the best place in the harem. So what's happening here, you see once again, some people look back and they say, oh, look, this is kind of like when Jacob is sold into slavery and he moves up in Potiphar's house. Joseph. Yeah, Joseph. I got my guys crossed, right? And then he has an allegation against him by Potiphar's wife, and then he moves up again in the prison, right? We see that, and so we see something like that. You see Daniel, Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego. You see them gaining favor and moving along. But you're going to see an interesting thing here as it unfolds. They continue to work through and practice their Jewish faith. So you see something like that, God putting people in their individual lives in a place to affect his purpose, but they handle it in different ways. We're going to see that unfold as the narrative goes on. So she's in the best place now. She's moved up. This guy has seen her beauty and who she is, and she's moved up already in the harem. Verse 10, Esther had not made it known her people or her kindred, for Mordecai had commanded her not to make it known. And every day Mordecai walked in front of the court of the harem to learn how Esther was and what was happening to her. And now, when it came the turn for each young woman to go into King Ahasuerus after being there 12 months under the regulations for the women, since it was the regular period of their beautification, 6 months with oil and myrrh and 6 months with spices and ointments. Esther had not made known her people or her kindred, for Mordecai had commanded her not to. So you see in Joseph, where he practices his faith. You see especially in Daniel, Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, that's how they get in trouble, because they are practicing their Jewish faith. Right? Mordecai, who's her dad, whom she must obey in this culture, has made it specifically known, do not tell them who your people are. Now, the tribe of Benjamin is a proud tribe. They should be, right? Why would she not say that? Why would he give her that directive? Well, the narrative doesn't tell us, but it kind of unfolds. And it would seem that Mordecai, he had a job in the court somewhere. We see him continuously at the gate. And the text doesn't tell us what his job was, but he's there. He somehow has a job in the palace, and he's around. So while he's already in the palace, he's checking on Esther every day to see what was happening. So he loves her. She's his daughter, and he's trying to make sure, is she all right? Are things going well with her, right? This is a concerned parent. So, when it came for each young woman to go into King Ahasuerus, so they're 1 full year. And the thinking here is, like, you know how I don't use perfume, but Katie does, and I appreciate it, and a lot of women do, right? How you put it on, and it smells good, and it kind of wears off. This is a process by which they have these oils put on them all the time, and so they just smell really good all the time because it's basically infused in their skin. And so this is just how they did it. So it's like permanent perfume. They're just perfumed all the time. It's one of those things like, newborn babies, for a while, they just have this particular newborn baby smell, and it's really good. It's kind of like that, right? And so, and they're putting on all this, like I said, it's beauty camp. And for those of you guys who are maybe older, they learn how to do stuff. Also, in this, they're learning etiquette. Amy Vanderbilt, this was the 50s, right? So Amy Vanderbilt, you go to a fancy dinner and how to use this silverware and this knife, and they put it out and how to do all the things and be a lady in society. They're learning all of that, right? They're learning how to be beautiful all the time. They're learning how to be in high society. But when they went in this way, they were given whatever they were desired from the king's palace to the harem. So here's the thing. Beauty camp, it's nice. If you're a pretty girl, you can go there. This is not a good thing for these ladies, because what happens when they go into their one night with the king, they lose their virginity to the king. And there's no promise that there's going to be a queen. And he has a steady stream of women coming in. And in addition to being beauty camp, today we would call this sex trafficking, because he legally went out and get them. They're compelled to be in there. But there are no 7-year-old girls sitting around dreaming about their wedding night and then having to go from one thing to another thing where you've sacrificed your virginity for the king, and then you go to a harem to wait to see if he likes you enough to call you back. And after that, can you have a husband? Will society let you have a husband? Do you grow old in the harem? All for one purpose, to please the king for one night. This is not a good thing. This guy is serial in his sexual abuse against these women. But he can do it because he's the king. And so on one hand, okay, they get some nice stuff, but there's no payoff that's worth that, really. So if you think about Esther, here she is, a Jewish woman, and whether they were in exile where they were practicing Jewish practice or not, maybe not practicing those things keeps her safe. Mordecai knows what's going to happen. Maybe it makes it better for her. But how do you handle that in your faith if you go in with one night in the king? She's going to become queen, but the other ones don't, even if she don't. How do you handle that in your faith? I've been misused in a way that I don't want to. And here I am married to a man that I don't really want to be married to, but here I am. This is not great for these young women, even if you are the queen. It is tragic what's happening here. And you'll see later, even though he gets a queen, this process doesn't stop. Yeah, so don't be confused about the nice things that these girls get. And there's like this sort of thing happens to today. The way I understand it is a lot of the people that are on the internet, these young women that are doing these things, they're trafficked just the same. And it looks like they have money and fame, and they do all this nasty stuff on the internet, and they're slaves. It's tragic. When you hear about those things, we should be praying for these people. But, however, God has got her in a place where he's using her for a purpose. And I don't know, in this case, you don't like that word, but look, she was put in this situation, but God's going to use her because she's there. So, as they've been in there, you get one night with the king, and you get to take into the harem whatever it is that you want. So verse 13 going on, it says this: when the young women went in to the king in this way, she was given whatever she desired to take with her. And in the evening she would go in, and in the morning she would return to the second harem in the custody of Shenachilaz, the king's eunuch, who was in charge of the concubines. So she would not go back into the king again unless the king delighted in her, and she was summoned by name. And when the turn for Esther Esther's turn came in, the daughter of Ahabiel and the uncle of Mordecai had taken with her, who had taken her in as his daughter to go into the king. She asked for nothing except what the Haggai, the king's eunuch, who had charge of the women, advised her. And now Esther was winning favor in the eyes of all who saw her. And when Esther was taken into King Ahasuerus, into the royal palace, in the 10th month, in which is the month of Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign, the king loved Esther more than all the other women, and she won grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgins. So he set the royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. And when the king gave a great feast for all of his officials and servants, it was Esther's feast, and it was granted a remission of taxes in the province, and he gave gifts with royal generosity. There we go. She's taking in with her. Now, think about this. There's a little bit in the text here where when they're in one harem and they know they're going to come out the other side, all the things that they have, riches and that sort of stuff, you could load up a backpack of all the riches and all this sort of stuff. Because if you didn't make it, at least you could take with you a consolation prize, from the king, basically, for being in his harem. If you never get called again, however you go out the other side, you get to take that with you. So if you don't think your odds are great, you take whatever you want, right? So Esther only takes what he says, right? And so I lost my place. Okay. In the morning she would, so it tells us in the morning she'd go to the second. So if you aren't queen, then you go to the second concubine, and he could call you back again if he wanted, but it doesn't have to be queen. So there we go. And so Esther, she asked for nothing except what the king's eunuch had given charge of. So thinking about this, Esther doesn't take a whole bunch of consolation prizes. She just goes in with whatever he said. Wear the gowns, wear the whatever you have, but don't take with you a bunch of stuff as a consolation prize from the king. So imagine this, the king is used to a gal showing up and she's just taking a bunch of money and stuff. And can you blame her? I'm not blaming a gal for this, right? But here Esther shows up, and she doesn't have luggage full of jewels and expensive stuff with her that she's pulling along. She just shows up. So she's winning favor because she's intelligent. Hey, what will set me apart from all these other gals? It is kind of a contest, so she doesn't probably really want to be there. But if you're going to be there, you might as well do your best, right? So when Esther was taken to King Ahasuerus in the royal palace in the 10th month, in the 7th year of his reign, the king loved Esther more than all the other women, and he won grace and favor in his sight more than all the other virgins. So he set a royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. Because of who she is, how she carries herself, and her beauty, she's now queen. That's pretty cool. Not a great road to get there. Probably not a great life, but here we go. So the king gave a great feast for all his officials and servants. It was Esther's feast, and he also granted remission of taxes to the provinces and gave gifts with royal generosity. People are going to love the queen. This is smart on his. So he's chosen a queen that maybe isn't, from his bloodline or somewhere else. But you know what? Just like he was winning favor with the big long party for all the people, if he gives a remission of taxes during that month, hey, look, I might like a leader who gives me a reprieve on my taxes for a month. At least that much money. I won't like him too much, but right? Winning favor. Oh, because she's queen, we got to reprove on taxes. What I couldn't do with a few more tax dollars. Anyway, so he's helping her win that, and then he gives gifts because, hey, I've got a queen now. And the country rejoices, right? Everybody loves a queen. Just think about it. In America, we love to follow the royal family, right? People still talk about Princess Diana and all that stuff, and they talk about the royal family. I don't know why, but people like that sort of thing. So people are now rejoicing that there's a queen. Esther's in the spot that God has directed her to get to. So now we have 2 chapters of scene setting, and now things are going to start going forward a little bit. Because here's what happens next. Now, when the virgins were gathered together the second time, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, and Esther had not made known her kindred or the people as Mordecai had commanded her, for Esther obeyed Mordecai just as when she was brought up by him. And in those days Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. Bigthan, Teresh, 2 of the king's eunuchs who guarded the threshold, became angry and sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. And this came to the knowledge of Mordecai, and he told Queen Esther, and Esther told the king in the name of Mordecai. And when the affair was investigated, he found it to be so, and the men were both hanged on the gallows, and it was recorded in the book of Chronicles in the presence of the king. Now when the virgins gathered together the second time, he's got a queen, and he's still gathering together the virgins. He has a queen, but he doesn't have monogamy. She is the queen. She has all the benefits of the queen, but think about it too. She's ended up being queen, and she knows that he has no intention of not continuing to get this steady stream of girls brought to him to continue this atrocity against them. That's what she had to live with. Can you imagine? Oh, he's in a mood he doesn't want to see you. He gets in another mood a few days later and he wants to see you. I feel bad for her and these young women. She had not made known her kindred. It's saying that a couple of times, right? And it's showing this relationship between Esther and Mordecai. She is obeying just like when she was brought up by him. She's obedient to her family line. This is important. This is a very important thing in people's faith. So Mordecai was at the gate. So Mordecai did something at the gate. We don't know what his job was, whether he was protecting. And then there's eunuchs who guarded the threshold. When people came into the door, people would pass right in front of these guys. There's all these layers of protection. And you'll see this later. There's people around, but they have to be the vetted people, and they're in there with the king, but only people that he calls can come in. And these guys had some job right at the door when people come in. So they have the last line of defense. So if they turn against the king and he's sitting there and they decide to carry out a plot, they could probably get it done. And so while they're vetted, these guys change their mind. And as people talk, these guys are talking about how much they hate the king, and then the plan is hatched, and Mordecai's like, ooh, I better take action. He can't approach the king. But who can? Esther. So he lets her know about the plot. There we go. The word is out. And it was investigated, and they were hanged in the gallows. And it was recorded in the book of the Chronicles in the presence of the king. Little foreshadowing there. If you read ahead, you know how this is going to work out later. We'll get to that in later chapters, like chapter 6-ish or something. What are the takeaways for us? Man, this is a difficult situation. If you just narrow it not to all the other girls, which is difficult. It's difficult to me to think about. But even in a difficult situation, in a situation where Esther has been placed, how she conducts herself. She's still obeying Mordecai. God uses her powerfully in the situation that she's in. And remember in chapter 1 it says the men who knew the times. She doesn't continue to act like the times. She continues to act in a way that God has prescribed to her. That's one of the big takeaways. There's always these tragedies in society. Sometimes there's tragedies in our life. Things happen to us. Things happen around us. But one of the things we can learn in a book that doesn't even mention God is that if you continue to do the things that God prescribed, He is going to work His purpose. So no matter what's going on in your life, everybody's got hurt. Some of us more than others. There's always something going around. Continue to follow God. Seek after Him. And He has got a purpose for you in the situation that you're in. For the betterment of His people. For the betterment of you and His people. That's a pretty amazing thing. So read ahead. Next week, Esther chapter 3. Father God, thank you for your word. Lord, it's just pretty incredible how you use your people. And even though sometimes bad and tragic things happen, Lord, that you use that for your good. We thank you for that. Lord, we pray that each one of us would just look at the people around us who are in bad situations and pray for them. Lord, there are so many like these young virgins who were just sacrificed for the pleasure of others. Lord, help us to pray diligently for them, and that you would send rescue and give those people purpose. For each one of us who may be in differing situations or walking alongside people with differing situations, help us cling to you and know that even though evil exists, you work above and through and above that to make sure that your purpose is fulfilled. And Lord, that purpose is to draw people to yourself for the purpose of salvation. Lord, we thank you and praise you in Jesus' name. Amen.